5.7, we're talking about solving equations using the quadratic formula. Here's your quadratic formula. Like I already said, if you don't know this formula, search it on Google or YouTube, like quadratic formula song, and then you can play it and listen to it at home, and it will be a lot of fun, I'm sure. Did he? I could show it to you guys, but it would just waste some time. You guys could do it on your own later. That's funny. Okay, so we'll have to look for that later. Make sure that your equation is set equal to 0. So we've talked about a lot of different ways to factor, right? We know how to factor with our diamond method, right? We know how to factor with our over-under method. We learned how to complete the square. All of these are solving quadratics. Now, if you look here on example A, there's no numbers that multiply to be 1 and add to be -4. Do we agree? Okay. So that means that either you could, on this problem, you could use complete the square or you could use the quadratic formula. Today, for the practice, we're going to do quadratic formula. But when you're completing the square, you want that middle number to be even so that you can cut it in half and not have a fraction. Okay? If you look at B, okay, first of all, could I take the 2 out of 7? No. So like this problem right here wouldn't be good for completing the square or over, under, or anything. You would just want to use your quadratic formula. So the quadratic formula always works no matter what, where our other forms only sometimes work. Okay? But I feel like those other ways take a lot less work than the quadratic formula. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Okay, so example 1. It is set equal to 0. And so this is where you're going to say A equals what? What's our A value? 1. B equals -4. And C equals 1. And we know what A, B, and C equal because in our equation, the A term is always with x squared, the B term is always with the plain x, and C is always the number that doesn't have an x. Okay, so now we're just taking all this information and we're plugging it into our quadratic formula. Okay, so x equals, okay, -b. What is -b?
4.
Good, +4 because it's the opposite, right? So 4 plus or minus the square root of b squared. So we're going to write that as -4 squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is 1, all divided by 2 times a, which is 1. And actually this x isn't divided, but sorry. Okay, so then to save myself a little bit of time, I go through here and I like simplify. What is -4 squared? So I'm just going to put a 16 there. And then what is -4 times 1 times 1? -4. So we end up writing this as 4 plus or minus the square root. And what is 16 minus 4? 12 all over 2. 2 times 1, which is 2. Can 12 reduce? Break down. Okay, it breaks down to... Okay, how do you do that? I did 4 and 3, and then so you end up with a pair of 2's, right?
Yeah.
So we have 4 plus or minus 2 root 3 all over 2. Now, don't forget that when you're reducing, a lot of you just like want to, you're like, oh, cancel those out. But you can't do that. Remember that this 2 has to go into both of these, or separate it into 2 fractions and then reduce. So when I reduce this, we end up getting what? 2. Good. 2 plus or minus root 3, or if you have 1 root 3, that is also correct. And this is what x equals. X equals this. And how many answers are actually here? 2, because 2 plus root 3 and 2 minus root 3.
You can like, for 2 root 3, you can divide the 2 and the 2 on the outside.
Yeah, because they're both outside.
And the 2 and the 4?
Yes, because really, you should rewrite this as 4 over 2 plus or minus 2 root 3 over 2. You can only reduce this bottom if it will go into both. Or if you separate it like that, then you could reduce one of them and not the other. Okay? All right. B. What do I need to do on B? Good. Subtract 11 because it has to be set equal to 0. If you don't do that, you'll end up getting the wrong answer. 2x squared plus 7x minus 11 equals 0. So what does A equal? Good. And B is? Good. And C is? Good. So we're going to go ahead and plug all that into our quadratic formula. So we have x equals -7 plus or minus 7 squared minus 4 times 2 times -11. Very good. Perfect. All over 2 times 2. Okay, and then again, I like to just simplify under my root to kind of save myself some time. So 7 squared is what? And then you have -4 times 2, which is -8. And then -8 times -11 is +88. Good. And when you add those together, it does equal 137. So we get -7 plus or minus the square root of 137 all divided by 4. And 137 does not break down. What? Okay, tell me. What happens? What do you get?
No, it can't. Never mind.
All right.
No, it can.
Okay.
Oh, never mind. No, it can't.
Okay. So I think we're in a consensus that we cannot. And maybe we can think of two numbers that multiply to be 137, but those numbers won't make a pair. Right? All right. So that's our answer. All right. And could we split that into two fractions if we wanted to? Yes. Exactly. All right. C. What are we going to have to do with C? What always needs to be positive? A. Okay. Yes, Hope.
Do you have to, like, bring the 2x plus 3 over to the other side?
You could. The only thing is that my A term is always with x squared, right? And right now it's a -5x squared. And we're going to end up wanting that to always, you want your A term to always be positive. So I would recommend just moving everything to the right, and then that way your A term will be positive. Okay? So I'm going to add 5x squared. So that cancels out. I'm going to subtract 7x. So that cancels out, and I'm going to add 4. So that cancels out. And when I write this, I would write it in descending order. So I'm going to start with what? Good. So we have 5x squared. And then 2x and -7x makes -5x. And then we have 4 and 3, which makes 7, equals 0. Do you have questions on what I just did? Okay, what are my A, B, and C values? Good, A is 5, B is -5, and C is 7. All right. For time's sake, we're going to go ahead and just do this together. So, x equals, -b would be 5 plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is -5 squared, minus 4 times A is 5 times C is 7, all divided by 2 times 5. We're going too fast? Okay, next, what do we do? Simplify. Okay, what is negative 5 squared? Positive 25. Negative 4 times 5 is?
Negative 20.
And negative 20 times 7 is?
Negative 140.
Negative 140. And what is 25 minus 140?
115. Negative 115.
Negative 115 is correct. So when we write this, we have 5 plus or minus the square root of negative 115 divided by 10. What are we going to do? Very good. Take out your I. So we get 5 plus or minus I root 115 all divided by 10. Can root 115 break down?
Maybe, I don't see.
No,
What did you find, Elton? It's 5 times 5 and 23.
It's basically no.
So no. Okay. I would though, because I noticed 5 and 10 can reduce. Do you guys see that?
Yeah, so 1 over 2 would be
So let's write this as 5 over 10 plus or minus I root 115 over 10. Can I reduce the 10 and the 115? No, because one's in the root and one's not, right? But 5 over 10 I can, and that's going to reduce to 1 over 2. So my answer for this is 1/2. Good. X equals plus or minus, or 1/2 plus or minus I root 115 over 10. Perfect.
Wait. I got a different answer. Oh, maybe I just wrote it different. I got x equals plus or minus I square root 115 over 2.
That is not right. So that's why I separated into two fractions, because I think what you just did is like cancel this out and made this a 2.
Yeah.
But when you cancel this out, this becomes a 1 and this becomes a 2. But you can't leave it like this as one fraction, because you would have to also reduce it with this. So that's why I separated into two fractions like that and then reduced it that way. Okay? All right, example 2 is just to show you that you will get the same answer using the quadratic as you would factoring. So we're just going to do it kind of real quick. What numbers multiply to be 32 and add to be 12? What two numbers?
8 and 4.
Good. X plus 8, X plus 4. When you set those equal to 0, what does X equal?
Negative 8 and negative 4.
Okay. So let's do the same problem using the quadratic formula and see if we end up getting negative 8 and negative 4. So A equals 1, B equals 12, C equals 32. Okay, so negative B would be negative 12 plus or minus the square root of 12 squared minus 4 times 1 times 32, all divided by 2 times 1. Did I do that too fast? Okay, what's 12 squared?
144.
144. Okay, negative 4 times 1 is? Negative 4, and negative 4 times 32 is?
128.
Negative 128. And what's 144 minus 128?
16.
16. Okay, so we have negative 12 plus or minus the square root of 16 all over 2. What is the square root of 16? 4. Okay, so since I have no roots, I'm going to write two separate equations. We have negative 12 plus 4 over 2 and negative 12 minus 4 over 2. What's negative 12 plus 4?
Negative 8 and 4.
Good. Negative 8 over 2, which reduces to
Negative 4.
negative 4. Negative 12 minus 4 is
Negative 16.
divided by 2 makes.
Negative 8.
Are those the same two answers we got originally over here?
Yes.
Yes. So do we see how it will work?
Yes.
But do you see how this is a lot more work than this?
Yes.
So if you can factor, factor. If you can't factor, use another method. Good?